What's up, everyone? Lance here, the host of See Through, and I haven't done a solo episode in a while, but I'm excited to be here today, just me, and to give you some updates on what's been going on in my life. And we're going to cover some articles, and it's going to be a really fun episode, so I'm excited for what I have to share here. For starters, I'm selling a new hat, and it's not this one, unfortunately. This is just me trying to hold on to summertime. Fall and winter comes, it gets dark at 5 p.m. and maybe I'm just trying to hold on. Plus it's raining outside, so this might come in handy. You know what, for you guys, I'll show you the actual hat I'm selling. Here it is. This is a new hat I'm selling. I've actually been wearing it in a few of my past episodes, so you might have already noticed it. But yeah, this is my new hat that I'm selling. It's an all-white baseball hat. And it says the words tunnel vision on the front in orange. It also has see-through embroidered on the back. If you're watching, you can see that. But yeah, this is a new hat that I'm selling that I'm excited about. So if it interests you, click the link in the show description. I'll have a merch link there. I also have other items. So in case you're new or it's been a while since you've checked out my merch store, go see what other items I'm selling there. I have a lot there to offer. So like I said, let's get into some updates. First one I'm going to share is I just turned 33 years old. And I'm sharing that mainly because, on average, people with RP are considered legally blind by the age of 40. So me being 33, 40's right around the corner, or at least it feels like it. And I'm not legally blind yet. I've shared that many times on here. But I do have, a diminished field of vision. So, yeah, every year that passes is a blessing. I'm excited to still be alive, to experience everything that I get to experience every year. But also, it's also like, ooh, I'm getting a little closer to that number 40, which I shouldn't even give any attention to because, everybody is different in terms of their progression when it comes to these like retinal diseases like RP. So yeah, I don't really know what to do with that thought. I just wanted to share it because it's something that I think about, when it comes to birthdays and age, What do you guys think? Should I worry about the age 40, the number 40? Do you think that's real? Is that something I should, think about? But yeah, man. It's been a long time since I've updated everyone. So I got to keep this short and sweet or else this episode would be like 10 hours long. So I picked a few things that I'm going to go over and share with everyone, basically to get everyone up to speed, but without, making a 10-hour long podcast here. So the first one I mentioned was my age. The second one that I want to mention is that I had O&M training. So for those who don't know, O&M training is short for orientation and mobility training. And it's essentially, you basically get taught how to use a white blind cane. I had 3 lessons, 1 a week for 3 weeks. I had a great instructor. Her name was Carol Moog, and she works for the Lighthouse Guild here in New York City. And she came to my apartment and chatted it up with me and kind of explained the process. And then we basically went out into the world and I was learning to use a cane. I wanted to get some footage of that, but my wife was at work and I was getting training. So I didn't really have any opportunity to get any visual or video or anything like that, which I would love to share with everyone. But yeah, basically, first day she came over, she just kind of explained the basics. She kind of measured my height, figured out what perfect length was for me with the cane. And then I got my first cane, which is exciting. Here it is right here. Ugh. So it's an Ambutech cane. And it's a cane that I plan to hold on to and use eventually. Right now, I'm not quite there, which makes this complicated, but I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I got my first cane. And then the next time she came back, we went out in my neighborhood. So we were walking around sidewalks and I was learning to use the cane there to kind of pick up on cues of how to listen for cars coming for which direction, where to stand on the sidewalk before crossing, and basically tips like that, how to walk in sync with the cane and have the right steps, the right range of pivoting the cane, left and right, making sure I'm going far enough left and right to kind of cover where I'm walking. Basically like the real basics of everything. And still very hard. What I'll say is learning to use a cane is exhausting. It wipes you out, because I was trying to focus the whole time, making sure I was stepping in the right manner and in rhythm. And, basically if the cane's on your left side, then you step with your right foot and vice versa. So there's like a pattern there. Just getting used to that rhythm is kind of difficult for me. I'm a white dude. Rhythm is kind of complicated for me. But yeah, that was interesting because I was out in my neighborhood, and I'm not gonna lie, I was very fearful of people watching me. I was very fearful that I was gonna see like my downstairs neighbors or, someone I walk by on the regular with my dog without a cane, and then they're gonna see me with a cane and be like, "Oh, what happened, Lance?" And you know what? It wasn't really that I was embarrassed by it. I just really didn't want to explain it. I didn't want to have to explain the long pitch of what RP is and, legal blindness versus actual blindness, like all these things, So I was nervous there. And then also I made eye contact with a few people walking by, which made me feel uncomfortable because they were probably very confused as to what was going on. Because, I had my instructor with me, and I obviously can see, but I'm getting taught to use a white cane. So it's not really something most people see on the regular. This is New York City, so people are used to seeing things they're not used to seeing. And then 5 minutes later, it's like it evaporated from their memory because it's just common to see bizarre stuff here. And that's what my instructor, reminded me of. She said, they're looking at you now, but 10 minutes later, they will have forgotten about you because they're going to be thinking about their own life and what they need to go do. Yeah, so my instructor, on that note, my instructor was not only great at teaching me like the literal way to use a cane, but she was also great at reminding me of the mental side of things. And, and that's kind of what this podcast and what See Through is all about, is kind of discussing the mental side of vision loss, because, there's a lot that comes with it, like me being nervous about my neighbors seeing me do the training, me wondering what people are thinking, seeing me learning to use the cane. And then the final lesson that I did was we went to the subway. So this was the big old day, we went down into the subway. This time, I will admit, I wore sunglasses. I know people are going to be laughing at this. But yeah, I wore sunglasses this time because I didn't want to make eye contact with people, because I didn't like that part during the first time I went outside of my neighborhood. And we were going in the subway, so instead of a couple people passing by, it was going to be hundreds of people, because this was early in the morning and people were going to work. So we go down in the subway. I'm learning how to use it, use the cane to go down the stairs, so I know basically when the steps end. I'm learning how to go up the steps where the cane's tapping each step. This is where a lot of things clicked when I was down in the subway. I was in the Court Square station in Long Island City, Queens. And this is a station I'm always in. And I usually just have to walk really slow to avoid people because, it's one of those places where people are just kind of going every which way. There's no real structure to which direction people are walking and where they're heading. You could be going north, south, east, west. It's one of those types of places. But this time I had the cane. And I'm not going to lie, this is when it basically sunk into me that the cane was useful. And I knew the cane was useful. I'm not saying it that way, but me experiencing it firsthand. So like I was down in that station. It's a long corridor, long hallway. I'm using the cane, and I felt great because I was looking up. I wasn't looking down at the ground. And I was able to feel confident walking, like I'm not going to run into anyone because I was using the cane to kind of sweep my area. And I also noticed that people were moving out the way. I also noticed that people really didn't care. Yeah, it felt great, honestly. And it made perfect sense why the cane was invented, which sounds silly, but I got to experience it firsthand, which is a big deal for me, honestly. And got on the subway, took it to another station, got off, walked on an outdoor platform, learned how to wait for the subway, basically get on, get off the subway. And then as we were going back to my apartment, the session was ending. A lady saw me and tried to escort me. She grabbed my arm and tried to escort me up the stairs. And I didn't like it. I've heard about that on other podcasts. I've heard that on my own podcast from my guests, but it was something else to experience it firsthand. But yeah, she grabbed in my hand and was trying to basically lead me to the stairs. I basically kind of shrugged her off and said, no, I'm fine. Thank you though. And went up the stairs. But I did notice that she was she seemed a little bit irritated that I didn't want her help. She was like, really? That kind of thing. And my instructor saw it all because she basically was with me, but she was keeping maybe a 5 to 10 foot distance from me, just observing me and how I'm learning to use the cane and all that. She saw it all happen, and she said I did a great job at being nice about, turning down the woman from helping me. But the way I played it back in my mind, I sounded really mean and irritated. So it was nice to have confirmation that my instructor said I was polite, because I was kind of fearful that I was mean to this lady who was just trying to help me, but maybe she shouldn't have grabbed my arm. Maybe that's what did it, But yeah, just from 3 sessions with a cane, I have so much respect to cane users out there. You guys are heroes for using the cane. It's a big deal. It really changes how you feel about yourself. You feel different about people watching you. And you put yourself out there. You are exposing yourself as being someone visually impaired or legally blind or blind. And for me, that's new because I'm not legally blind and I don't use a cane. So putting myself out there, even as someone who does this podcast, puts myself out there on the internet and spills my heart to everyone about everything. It's a whole nother ball game when you're out there using a cane and walking the walk versus talking the talk. So yeah, I have a huge respect for anyone using the cane. And I feel honestly great that I did the cane training. I did it basically because I just wanted to get it done with. I know that sounds kind of harsh, but it's one thing that was just kind of hanging over my head was the cane. It was very mystical. It had a mystique to it. I didn't quite understand it, So I wanted to kind of learn for myself, about the cane and what it means to use it and how to use it, basically. So that way, further down the road when, my vision loss is at a place where I need to use the cane, I won't waste any time being kind of hesitant because I don't know how to use it. So I don't have that excuse anymore. I know how to use a cane, the basics of it. I might need a refresher on it if I wait too long. I'm going to try to every now and then, go outside with it and just practice. And that way I'm not going to lose everything that I learned. The training was through the Lighthouse Guild here in New York. They had this cool grant that I basically won. I guess that's how you would say it, but I won this grant because I'm not legally blind. I had to apply for a grant to get the training. If you are legally blind, you get the training for free. But yeah, so I'm not legally blind, so I had to do it that way. took about a year for me to hear back. And then I got it through the Lighthouse Guild. So shout out to the Lighthouse Guild. Shout out to Carol. She's a great instructor, a great woman, and taught me a lot and made me feel very comfortable the entire time, which was something that I was worried about. I was worried that it was just going to be this insanely awkward, scenario over and over again. But Carol made it nice, and I'm very thankful for Carol, and I'm very thankful for the Lighthouse Guild. And again, I just want to give a shout out to all you cane users out there. I got mad respect for you. But yeah, that's a quick summary of kind of how cane training went down for me. If anyone is interested in, in learning more or want some advice, if they're considering, getting the training, feel free to reach out to me. Like I said, I went through Lighthouse Guild. I'm sure there's an organization in your, city or town, or state that can help you and provide, assistance for you and all that. So I'd love to help out in that way. So yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Maybe I can help direct you somewhere. All right, so next update, I went into Manhattan recently, and I met up with a past guest of this podcast, Sheridan ODonnell. Sheridan is a filmmaker, and he also has retinitis pigmentosa. He's legally blind, and he was diagnosed during the pandemic with RP. And when I was talking to him then, he was in post-production of his first feature film called Little Brother, which now is complete because that's what I went to go see at the Soho International Film Festival at the beautiful Angelica Village East Theater in the East Village of Manhattan. But yeah, I got to see Sheridan's film on the big screen, which was amazing. And while watching it, I felt this big sense of pride. And I felt proud of Sheridan. I went to film school and I've made some short films. I've said all this before in past episodes. And I always thought that RP was just going to kill that dream for me, kill that even potential reality for me. But Sheridan is proof that that's not the case, because he made a wonderful film. It won Best Feature Film at the Soho International Film Festival, and his lead actor also won Best Actor. So yeah, shout out to Sheridan. Congrats on winning that. But yeah, Sheridan made this great movie, that had a great message, great storyline, great acting, great production value, everything. I mean, everything about it was the real deal, so be on the lookout for that film, Little Brother. I don't know when it's going to be streaming anywhere. It's doing the film festival thing now. But yeah, just seeing Sheridan kind of killing it in that space was awesome. It kind of brings me to a point of like using the word disability excellence. There's a lot going on in, with diversity, equity, inclusion, right? Which is great. But I also have the opinion that you should still be undeniable. You should still be undeniable with your talent. Just because you audition for a film and you're disabled doesn't mean that you should get the role just because of that. You still have to be talented. You still have to be good at what you do. If you want to create a podcast, it needs to be a good podcast. You want to be a filmmaker, it needs to be a good film. You want to be an actor, you got to be good at that. You want to be a musician, you name it, whatever. Archaeologist, I don't know, any job basically. But my point that I'm making is if you're undeniable, it will happen. And when you're undeniable, you will see that success. And it takes a lot of hard work. And nothing's going to be handed to you. I know I sound like a baby boomer right now. Nothing's going to be handed to you. But that is the reality. So if you want to be in that space, in that world, don't just bank on your disability getting you there. Disability excellence is kind of what I like to preach, and kind of my mantra, I guess. Be undeniable. When you're undeniable, you get these opportunities, and that's when you truly are an inspiration. If you just got handed something because of X, Y, and Z, is it deserved? Society is going to see right through that. But if you earn it and you are undeniable in your talent, that's inspiring. That's what works for people. That's what changes perspectives. And that, to some, that may be a controversial statement, but I don't think it is. I think deep down, everyone knows that I'm saying nothing incorrect. But shout out to Sheridan for his disability excellence. And I told Sheridan this, and I'm speaking from my perspective. I don't honestly know Sheridan's perspective on what I'm talking about. So this is all coming from me. I'm just describing something with Sheridan. But yeah, I spoke with Sheridan and I told him this. I said, your film has a message and you being a filmmaker has a message. So you're basically killing two birds with one stone in regards to, spreading his own personal message out there. Him being a visually impaired, legally blind filmmaker sends a message to the world that, hey, I'm here and I can do this and I'm great at it. But also the stories he gets to tell have a broader message. Like, for example, Little Brother was about suicide. And it was a very deep movie. And it had a lot of intricate layers about suicide involved. And, it was a very emotional film, but it also had a lot of comedy in it. There's a lot of laughs in the film too. So anyways, I'm going on. I'm going on a little too long with this, but yeah, I'm just excited for Sheridan and I'm pumped up for what he's doing for, visually impaired filmmakers. So I'm excited about that. But on another note, after the screening, we went to a bar. We were kind of hanging out in front of the theater. Sheridan was kind of talking to a bunch of people, he was the man of the hour. And when that hour ended, and everyone was kind of going home, Sheridan was like, let's go to a bar. So we walked to a bar. I was with my wife. Sheridan was with his wife. And I had my friend and his girlfriend. And we were all walking to this bar. It was a couple blocks away. But there was this homeless guy. And he was watching us when we were standing outside the front of the theater and kept eyeballing us. But when we started walking to the bar, he was following us. And it was creepy because he was 5 feet behind me and my wife walking. And, it's nighttime. I'm holding my wife's hand. Sheridan's walking. He's holding his wife's hand. We're both being guided, by our wives. And then we're walking to this bar. And then this guy's following us from behind. So, I'm already struggling because it's nighttime. But then it's I got to turn all the way around to see this guy following me. I don't know his intentions. Is he just creeping on us? Does he have an aggressive intent? Other people were kind of watching him. My wife was panicking. She didn't like it. She didn't feel comfortable. And no one felt comfortable. And he followed us a good three blocks. And we would stop at a corner, wait for, the light to change so we could cross the street. And he would be right there just staring at us. And my friend even asked him hey, man, what are you doing? You following us? And he just had no answer, no response. He just kind of stared back in this kind of dead stare. And then eventually we lost and we turned a corner and he decided not to follow us anymore. But yeah, it was just an uncomfortable situation. And it was kind of, the reason I'm bringing it up is because RP, man, and RP and masculinity is something I've talked about before. But you want to feel in those situations, I got this, I'm a big guy and I was bigger than that guy. But at the same time, it's nighttime. I got my wife with me. We got people with us. I don't know if he has a weapon. And, the last thing you want to do, I've been living in New York for, over 5 years now. I've learned that the last thing you want to do is escalate something, So you basically the approach to everything here is just kind of try to mind your own business, let it naturally run its course. If you really don't like the situation you're in, leave the situation versus escalate, an encounter by engaging in communication or an argument with someone. So yeah, but it's nighttime and everyone's feeling uncomfortable. My wife's feeling uncomfortable. I'm thinking in my mind, do I say something to this guy? Or is that going to escalate it? And then I'm also planning in my mind, I'm if this guy tries anything, because I couldn't see what he was doing because he's following us from the backside. If he tries anything, I'm trying to mentally prepare myself. All right, if he's trying anything, then I got to really step in and do my thing here, or at least try to, with the limited vision I have at night. And it just kind of makes you feel uncomfortable. It kind of humbles you in a sense. You're like a little bit uncertain of how to proceed with things. And if you had full sight, you might have been able to feel a little more confident. But it sucks to know that my wife was uncomfortable and I wasn't making her feel more comfortable. And Sheridan had to go through the same thing. His wife kept looking back and checking out the guy, seeing if everything was good. My wife was doing the same thing. I tried to turn around a few times to see, but maybe he was in a blind spot of mine. Sometimes my friends would say he was right by me, but I wouldn't even know he was there. So it's just, it wasn't the best situation, but it makes for a good story for this podcast. And then we went to a bar and had some beers, and I got to chat it up a little more with Sheridan, and it was nice meeting him and his wife. And I look forward to, furthering that connection and friendship. So shout out to Sheridan. But yeah, it was an uncomfortable situation, made me feel uncomfortable, it made me feel uneasy. And just wanted to share that with everyone. And speaking of meeting up with people from the RP community, I went to RP Fest number 2. But yeah, I met up with the same guys I met up with a year ago, though I made a vlog about it called RP Fest. But yeah, I took the train upstate and I hung out with some buddies of mine who also have RP. Ed, Eric, Vinny, Mike, and Steve. We went out on a boat. I got to drive a boat. Ed's nephew, Jeff, was the boat owner operator, and we were out in the Hudson River. And it was kind of an empty day on the river. Not many boats are out there. So he let us all kind of take turns, driving the boat. I was flooring it, honestly, pushing it as fast as I was going. Mike Tubiak, or Tubiak Maniac, as you may know him, he was pushing it, and I think we were close to like 50 miles per hour or something like that on the Hudson River. But yeah, it was really fun to operate a boat, just kind of be out on the water. I've always wanted to be out on the Hudson. I look out my window. If you take a train upstate and you take the Hudson Line train, you kind of look out your window, you see the Hudson River, and that's exactly where I was. And every time I've looked out that window, I've always been like, man, I want to be in a boat on that river. So that was really awesome to kind of actually go out and do. And then we had, bonfire at nighttime. Ed and his family were hosting us, and they made us a bunch of really, really good food, lasagna, cookies, sausage and peppers, brownies, coffee, eggs, so much food, too many to name, honestly. Yeah, it was a great time, and it's great camaraderie. Basically, we just sit around, we banter with each other, make jokes, and sometimes RP comes up, sometimes it doesn't. And yeah, it's just really nice, and I would highly recommend it. My friend Vinny, who was part of this group, he posted on the RP support page on Facebook, and he mentioned like, hey, we get together, this group of guys gets together, start your own, If you don't know anyone with your eye condition or eye disease or disability, use social media. This is what we did, to find people near you or close enough to you and try to schedule a hangout. It's nice to meet other people with your condition. It makes you feel less strange about your condition. And it also helps you understand your own condition more, because you're seeing how it affects different people and how different people at different phases in their life, are affected by it or have adapted to it. And it's inspiring, honestly, because you're like, oh, I'm going to be okay because Steve's in his 40s and he's still working full time, and he's a full-time cane user, and he has a very active and fulfilling life. It just kind of puts you at ease, because you kind of see by example through others that life doesn't end, even with a really progressed, loss of vision. So I highly recommend, meeting people with your disability or a condition. Use social media. Social media has a lot of negatives, but it also has a lot of positives. You can connect with a lot of people on there. So yeah, find people local to you and try to schedule something. If not, just have like a group chat or something, where you can kind of connect in that way. At least, something's better than nothing. So, I still think there's a lot of people out there who were like me before I started this podcast. When I started this podcast, I didn't know anyone else with RP besides my mom. Now I know hundreds, literally thousands of people with RP. Get out there, meet some people, talk to some people. I'm telling you, it'll make you feel less strange about everything. It's a nice thing to do. But yeah, shout out to all the fellas who were at RP Fest. It's always a great time hanging with you guys. Thanks again, Ed, for hosting and all that you and your family did. So appreciate it. Really do. What else is there? I'm addicted to these. They're called Zen, and they're basically nicotine pouches. It's not tobacco. It's not chewing tobacco. It's a pouch. It looks like this. And you put it up in your gums. And I know it's not a good sound to hear. But yeah, I know what everyone's thinking. Lance, didn't you make a video covering an article about smoking and how it can speed up cataracts and all that? Yes, I did. Yes, I still believe all that. And still, I'm not proud of the fact that, I got addicted to, these nicotine pouches. But at the same time, I don't know if that article specifically meant like smoking, like inhaling smoke and like cigarettes with all the additives and all that, because this is just purely nicotine salt. Anyways, that's besides the point. I wanted to bring up something really quickly, because I'm, like I said, I've been doing these. So one, heads up, when they say something's addictive, they mean it, I started out with a couple a day. Now I'm doing like 8 or 9 a day. So be careful, stuff really can be addicting. I know that sounds silly to say, but yeah, why am I bringing up nicotine? Besides the fact that I am going against my word of the article I covered, I just wanted to say, having RP, just living life is stressful. And sometimes you want to partake in a vice. Sometimes you want to do a nicotine pouch. Sometimes you want to have a beer. Sometimes you want to binge eat. Have an unproductive, lazy day. Life can be stressful. And then there's also this pressure to be productive. And I just want to say, it's like sometimes, when you're hyper-focused on health or eye health, you feel like you can't have any vices because literally everything basically speeds up vision loss. Every vice is going to speed up vision loss. It's frustrating, because you're like, I can't do that, can't do this, can't do that, because that might speed up my vision loss. And that's smart. Some people have awesome willpower and they can be like that. But some people that frustration almost drives them to want to just kind of rebel against it altogether. And I think that's kind of what happened with me. I'm just being transparent and open about my own psyche and how I think of things. I think I felt so frustrated that I feel so frustrated I technically shouldn't have any vices at all if I want to try to preserve my vision as long as possible. And I got irritated at that. So basically, I think I've been doing these kind of out of spite to my vision loss. I know that sounds strange, but and also it's a nice little buzz. I sit down at my desk and I edit. I'm a video editor for a living. I do this podcast on the side. And it's nice to just have something up in your mouth, kind of, feel a little buzz from the nicotine. I used to casually smoke back in the day when I would drink, but haven't in a while. Don't ever want to smoke again. So to me, this is nice. But I know it's going to be short-lived. I'm planning on doing Sober October. I'm filming this in September, so don't worry. And I'm going to try to do a whole month clean of everything. Wish me luck. But anyways, I just kind of wanted to share that idea. Sometimes when you try to hyper-focus on protecting your vision, you're like, I can't have any vices. I can't go outside too much because the sunlight, or I don't have my sunglasses, so I shouldn't go outside, or I need a hat. Well, it's like, just try to enjoy life, reasonably. just reasonably try to enjoy life. Try to protect your vision too. Try to make smart decisions. I'm not saying that. But also at the same time, let yourself live a little bit. Every now and then, maybe rebel against your vision loss. Just rebel against it. You know, for some that may be not talking about vision loss. For some that might be using a cane. That might be a rebellion against vision loss. You know what? I've been so stressed out about using the cane. I'm just going to use it and I'm going to rebel in that way. So I don't know. It's sometimes like there's like a push and pull with when you have like an eye disease or a disability. Sometimes you just feel like rebelling against it because you feel like, you know, there's expectations of how you should operate and all that. I don't know if any of that made sense, but I just wanted to kind of rant about that real quick. But yeah, speaking of articles, you know, like the one I talked about when I discussed smoking and cataracts, let's cover some here on this solo episode. Something I like to do as part of these episodes if you're new to these. I got 3 articles. They're all very different, but they all connect. So I think this is going to be exciting. So let's start. All right, so let's jump into articles. My friend Victor Mifsud sent me this article. He's been on the podcast several times. You may know him as the blind biohacker, but he has a wealth of knowledge in terms of, you know, what's going on in terms of, you know, ways to treat eye disease, potentially reverse it or cure it. So he sent me this article, and it's called New Cell Atlas Signals Hope for Aging Visual Impairments. Here's the article. And it talks about this groundbreaking, you know, treatment that's going on that can help prevent, reverse glaucoma and macular degeneration. And it's really interesting stuff. And guess what? I'm not going to cover it. And that's no shade to my friend Victor. The article's great. It's going to be in the show description if you really want to read it. But I guess what I wanted to bring up was the fact that sometimes I get exhausted with the whole find a cure thing. I know I'm not the only one, but I'll share my 2 cents on it. I'm obviously hopeful for a cure. I obviously support, you know, the research that goes into finding a cure, but sometimes it's like reading these articles, they're just like teasers. You know, it's like, ooh, this sounds good. This sounds promising. But then when you start reading the article, it's like, we'll be around, you know, clinical trials should begin within a decade. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. So yeah, I try not to get too deep in the weeds in terms of keeping up to date on everything that's going on. But at the same time, my curiosity kind of gets me, and I do end up checking these articles and reading these articles. But I guess my point is, like, sometimes it's exhausting to kind of think about things through this lens of cures. And again, I love a cure. I would take the cure. But at the same time, it's like, I'm sure when there's a cure, I'm going to hear about it. But yeah, on the topic of, you know, cures and, you know, looking for cures, keeping up to date on cures and all the research that's going on, I wanted to make a point, and I don't mean to sound mean or controversial or anything during this segment, so my apologies if I come across that way. But it's kind of like I see online sometimes certain influencers, certain people talking about how they wouldn't cure their blindness even if they could. And I just find that strange. I find that to be like you're trying to blow smoke up my ass. You know, it's like, don't get me wrong. I've made a lot of great connections through my eye condition. That's my dog. I made a lot of connections through my eye condition. And I've learned a lot about myself by learning to accept, you know, the eye condition I have. And I wouldn't take back a lot of these connections. Like, even if I was cured, I'd still be friends with the friends that I've made who also have RP and other disabilities or eye diseases. But to say you wouldn't cure your vision just seems like just seems a little delusional in my opinion. Because, like, you're going to go use a cane. You're going to use adaptive tech, screen readers, canes. you know, that stuff is a tool to help you adapt to your vision loss. But you wouldn't actually cure your vision loss. That's like the ultimate tool would be the cure. The ultimate tool to adapt to your vision loss would be to correct your vision loss. You know, and I know that's not like the classic, you know, disability empowerment kind of message that you hear a lot, which I also support. And that's beyond the point. That's kind of part of the point I'm making is I think you can do both. I think you can be proud of your disability, learn to accept and live with your disability, learn to adapt to your disability. But I also think simultaneously, you can also be hopeful about finding a cure for your condition, you know, and all that. And also be honest with yourself in the sense that, yeah, life would be easier without my disability. Life would be easier if my vision was cured. A lot of stress, anxiety would instantaneously disappear if my vision was cured. And I know that to be the case for a lot of people. So when I hear people say they wouldn't cure their vision, you know, and they may be telling their truth. They may really think that. I guess it's hard for me to wrap my mind around that kind of logic. And I just wanted to bring that up because, you know, typically I do cover these types of articles about cures, but today I wanted to make a point, you know, that you can do both. You know, you can stay up to date on cures, but you can also simultaneously learn to be comfortable in your own skin. You know, it goes both ways. It can go both ways. You know, don't feel like you're being ableist for hoping that researchers and scientists find a cure for your condition. Because think about the future generations. It'd be like if you're going to have a child and there's a box to check, sighted or blind or non-disabled, disabled, and you could pick the box before your child was born. That's basically you telling me that you would click the box for disabled, you'd click the box for blind because you think that it's great. I don't know, that maybe I'm being harsh. But I just disagree with that mentality, and I think it's bullshit. And I think it's taking disability pride a little too far. I think it's taking it a little too far when you say things like, "I wouldn't cure my vision even if I could." I don't believe you, and I do think it's some sort of marketing to help your brand as an influencer, you know, and I'm not going to name any names here. But yeah, I'm not going to cover this article. But again, I will have this article in the link in the show description. So check it out if you want to. But I'm going to move on to something different. So on that same note of acceptance, I brought up this article in the New York Times that was written by Andrew Leland, which was a recent guest of this podcast. He recently put out a really amazing book called The Country of the Blind. I highly recommend it. Go check it out. It's doing really well. It's getting a lot of buzz, and it's well-deserved. Go check it out. I promise you it'll be worth your time, especially if you have RP or an eye disease and you're currently in the process of losing your vision. It will really feel like he's in your head. But Andrew, he's a great writer. He sometimes contributes and writes articles for the New York Times. In this article, you know, for people with disabilities, technology needs to do more. And it says, and against techno-ableism, Ashley Shue argues that it's not the individuals who need fixing, it's their environment. So this is basically a book review of Ashley Shue's book called Against Techno-Ableism, Rethinking Who Needs Improvement. You know, I'm not going to read the article verbatim. I'm going to summarize it. But basically, Ashley Shue wrote this book, put it out, and Ashley Shue herself was in her early 30s when diagnosed with bone cancer, and she underwent a partial leg amputation, after which she was fitted with a prosthetic foot and leg. And then a chemo drug affected her hearing, so she was also prescribed hearing aids. Ashley Shue is a philosopher of technology who teaches humanities courses to future engineers and doctors and nurses at Virginia Tech. And Ashley felt as if her new prosthetics had transformed her into a real-life version of the synthetic humans she'd been lecturing on. A self-described technology that word is hard for me. Technologized. You know what? I'm just going to take the L on that one. And you can comment, make fun of me in the comments for not being able to pronounce that. A cyborg, a cryptborg. Shu talks about, becoming an amputee, and this is what she says. She says, when I became an amputee, people kept reassuring me, and then in parentheses it says actually reassuring themselves, that with advanced and wonderful prosthetic technologies, I would be back even better than ever. She says that she would be superhuman, enhanced, a $10 million bionic woman. So long story short, and I'm going to recommend you check out this book. I haven't read it. I just wanted to acknowledge a couple of things from this article that caught my eye and that I think is going to segue into the next thing I'm covering. Shu acknowledges the transformative role that tech plays in her life. In her author photo, she affectionately cradles her unattached prosthetic like a ukulele. But in this series of short, wonderfully lucid essays, she argues that techno-ableism, the popular depiction of tech as a wholesale cure for disability, does real damage by positioning the disabled body as fundamentally broken. The goal of existing technologies is too often rehabilitation into the mainstream. The amputee ought to walk normally. The deaf person speak. The autistic person have quiet hands, and it's up to engineering to get them there. Within this framework, any possibility of a joyful, disabled life lived without the need for improvement is unimaginable. Yeah, so long story short, I think Ashley Shu wrote this book because she's an amputee and she uses a prosthetic leg. And she noticed, after undergoing, using these prosthetic limbs, that there was a societal expectation to essentially to make technology so great that it cures, her disability. And, that goes back to what I'm talking about with the, looking for cures for eye diseases. And I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with. I think friends and family of people with disabilities struggle with this, maybe more than the people with disabilities do, where it's like, oh, what's the cure? What's the cure? Let me donate. Let me help. Is there any way, what cures are going on? Blah, 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 blah. It's like a hyper focus on the cure, which makes you feel, with the condition, makes you feel kind of icky because you're like, damn, you really want me to get cured, don't you? And then also with people themselves, some people will choose to be more passive in their approach to learning how to adapt to their disability because they assume it's going to get cured through medicine or technology. And it can kind of be like a way to procrastinate on accepting your disability or procrastinate on learning to adapt to your disability. Because you're just like waiting out for the cure. So therefore, once you're cured, you won't need to do X, Y, and Z. In fact, if you did X, Y, and Z, if you learn to use a cane, learn to use this specific tech, then it's going to be a waste of time because once you're cured, you won't even need to have to use it. It's interesting, right? I find this all interesting because, again, it's going back to, being exhausted about trying to keep up with what's going on in the medical research world. But then it's also like there's the technology world too, for other, different types of disabilities, and they go hand in hand. And Ashley Shu coined the term techno-ableism, which I guess she's referring to ableism in regards to trying to cure people with disabilities through technology, which again is a good thing. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm happy that people are working on that stuff. But I guess what I would be concerned about in regards to this topic would just be, I would advise people to not bank on it. Advocate for the research. Advocate for the cures. Be hopeful for the cures. But don't let that anticipation of a cure stop you from enjoying yourself today. Don't let it stop you from trying to accept your life and who you are and what you're living with. Don't let it be a good excuse for you to procrastinate. I think there's a lot of power. It comes in just accepting your situation and trying to make the best out of it. So yeah, I just wanted to warn everyone, that it can be confusing and it can be conflicting, because on one side you have disability pride saying, you're perfect as you are. But on one side you have, science and medicine saying, hey, we're working hard. We're spending millions and millions of dollars and tons of hours of time and tons of resources, tons of people with sharp minds are dedicating their lives to finding these cures and working on finding these solves for disabilities, whether it's through technology or medicine, stem cell treatments, vaccines, whatever. And so it's confusing because on one side, you got the disability pride side, and then on the other side, you got people who are working hard to find a cure. It kind of sends a mixed signal, right? It does send a mixed signal. It can be confusing. I think somewhere in the middle is a perfect sweet spot where you're not deep in the weeds. You're not like super looking for the cure. You're not super dependent on the cure. You're still being independent, learning to accept and adapt to your disability. And you're also proud of your disability in that regard. You're owning your disability. You're not hiding it and waiting for your cure either. But I also think, you don't want to be too far on the other side where you feel like even you love your disability so much that even if a cure came out, you wouldn't take it, So, they just try to find that perfect balance. There's a seesaw, there's a balance there to have. And you can do both. Like I said, I'm just reiterating that point. But also Ashley Shue is talking about there's a spectrum even with society. So people without the disabilities and what their expectations are. I've been really covering about the POV of someone with a disability. Here I'm talking about, the POV of society. To think from society's point of view, and what Ashley Shue is really nailing down here is that not only should society try to help by, finding cures and doing all this research, but society should also work on accepting people with disabilities and not treating people with disabilities as outcast, So it goes both ways. It's like people with disabilities should be hopeful for cures, appreciative of all the work being done, but they should also be doing the work themselves to adapt and accept their condition. And then society should also keep doing the research, obviously keep doing the research, keep doing what you're doing there, but also work on just accepting and normalizing, disabilities in general and what, not trying to basically eradicate disability by curing it, just learn to accept it now. What about now? I guess that's the best way to put it. What about now? And it goes both ways for society and yourself. There's a spectrum there. Try to figure out at least where your place is. Try to know your place on that scale. All right, that leads me to the last thing I'm going to cover in this episode, but it's a fun one. So I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of the comedian Theavon. More specifically, his podcast this past weekend. It's my favorite podcast. It's probably the only podcast that I listen to every single week. I find his humor, it aligns with my sense of humor. I love the Southern charm to it. And I love the kind of made up stories he makes. And I like the fact that he does solo episodes. Big inspiration why I do these solo episodes, honestly. And he gets to talk and express himself. And you really feel like you get to know him and you really feel like he's authentic. So I'm a big fan of Theo. So like I said, I listen to every episode. And this episode came out 7 months ago. So I guess I've been sitting on this one for a while. I didn't know if I should approach it or not approach this topic. But he did an episode with Dave Portnoy, who's the CEO of Barstool Sports. But yeah, I wanted to play the very beginning of their episode because it really caught my ear, and for obvious reasons. But you'll hear it here.
I hired a guy strictly because he's legally blind. But it was he interviewed. It was wallpaper. He was so boring. But he knew me. He's like, I have one thing that may sway you, in my favor. It's like, what? He's like, well, I'm legally blind. I'm like, well, can I make fun of you for it? Is it open game? He's like, yeah. So we hired him.
Oh, wow.
He's still he's still with us in a way. Yeah. To the point we thought he was faking it because he knew that would get me. So one day we just, and a bunch of people thought he was faking it. So we called him up. I'm like, I'm just going to like toss my wallet to him and see if he reacts. Smacked him right in the face. It's the only time like, I felt bad. And so he was literally blind, but he'd sit at his computer, like what you were saying, with this huge magnifying glass. You tell him to do something, it took him 4 hours.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a gimmick, but not the most productive guy to ever come down the street.
Yeah, we interviewed a blind woman one time, and it was pretty fascinating. She said she remember like she almost feels like a computer sometimes, like how like she would remember the way she would walk to school and stuff like that.
So she lost her sight.
Yeah, she had some sight when she was young, and it wasn't a lot, and then she lost it completely.
Yeah,
and so then she had to she said she started to feel like a computer, and the only animal she didn't like, she said, was a snake. She said a snake doesn't give any feedback. She's like, it just feels like. Just like a piece of Satan, I guess.
Maybe I was born to be blind. I don't like snakes either.
Yeah.
That's the age-old question. Like, would you rather like, if you were blind, would you rather have been able to see or never been able to see?
I think I would like to, if I'm going to be blind, I'm going all in. I'm saying never see.
Right, because then you don't know what you're missing.
Yeah. And then you can yell stuff. You could use I don't want to say slurs, but you could probably say things that are, other people are going to be like, oh, he shouldn't say anything. Like, oh, he's blind, you know?
So yeah, that's the section I wanted to play. And it's right at the very beginning. And I wanted to bring this up because I find it very fascinating. If you're listening to this podcast, you're deep in the weeds on what vision loss is, disability culture is, if you're listening to the See-Through podcast. So I always kind of wonder, what do people not in this space think about blindness? Like, what do people who without someone in their family or a friend or someone who's kind of, uneducated on, the whole blindness is a spectrum kind of thing, what do they think about blindness? Or when they meet people, and this kind of candid, banter between Theavon and Dave Portnoy kind of was interesting to me, because it was like I was a fly on the wall in one of those conversations. And it wasn't good. Dave Portnoy talked about how he hired the guy specifically because he was blind, and he was the person he hired was legally blind. And he also goes on to mention that they didn't believe that he was blind, so he threw his wallet into his face and then felt bad about it, because when it hit the employee in his face, that's when he believed that he wasn't lying. So that's something you hear a lot when you hear a lot about people seeing someone who's legally blind using a white cane, but they're also using the phone, and then they get accused of being a faker. It's why the phrase blindness is a spectrum was invented, because you can be both. You can still see and be blind at the same time. And that confuses a lot of people. It confuses a lot of people very badly. And this is, I don't know, I just thought that I just wanted to share this moment. Like, I know it's not like a feel-good thing. And I have listened to Theavon's episode with his blind guest. I actually recommend listening to that episode. I think Theo did a great job. He asked a lot of really curious questions. I could tell he was genuinely curious and authentic and was trying to learn about blindness from that guest. So I do recommend that. And by no means am I throwing shade to Theo. Again, he's my favorite podcaster. I've seen him live a couple of times. I'm a huge fan. But yeah, I did find what Dave Portnoy said. I found it to be insensitive, but I mean, that's kind of his whole brand. That's kind of his whole thing. I'm going to do a deeper dive on this whole situation, because there's more layers to this in regards to that candidate working and his time at Barstool Sports. I'm going to do a deeper dive on that. So keep a lookout for that. What do you think about this? Like, have you ever got your bubble burst? You've heard like someone you're a big fan of, or not even a big fan of, but just someone you don't really have any issues with, but then you hear them say something like that. It's like, all right, do I now have beef with Dave Portnoy because he threw a wallet in a legally blind's face because he thought he was faking it? Or is that just something I just need to accept and be like, well, Dave Portnoy is uneducated on the spectrum of blindness. What should I expect? I don't know. It puts you in a weird scenario. It's like, what should we actually expect from society, from the people who aren't in this world? Because I think when you have high expectations, I think that's when you get them shattered. You know, that's when people let you down. You know, if you think that people are going to be more accepting of something than they are, and then when you realize they're not, or they're more ignorant to it, or not even ignorant, that's a strong word, uneducated, and they sound uneducated when they talk about it, how do you process that? You know, it's like kind of like the age old, you need to have a thick skin, kind of thing, you know. But yeah, how do you process that? What kind of stuff do you let slide? What kind of stuff do you chime in and kind of educate on? Do you have expectations from others in society to know this stuff, or do you not have expectations? There's a lot of just uneducated people on this whole topic, this whole world that we're in, if you're listening to this, that we're a part of and we're very familiar with, but most people have no clue about this world, you know? So what should we even expect out of society, and then how do we intend to reach these people? But yeah, I'm basically just trying to get the wheels turning in people's brains, present this information. You know, I don't pretend to know the answers to all this stuff. I'm just sharing my own personal opinion, my hot take on all this, and hopefully it gets the wheels turning if you listen to this episode. And I want to end on one personal recommendation. If I had to summarize, if I had to give advice, I would say focus on yourself. You know, these are large societal issues, but focus on yourself. You know, there's a classic quote, you know, get your own house in order before you criticize the world, you know. So yeah, get your own life in order, you know. Get your employment down, get your money right, get your health right. You know, do what you need to do to succeed and feel good. Then you can start focusing on these larger societal issues. I think a lot of people put the societal issues first because it makes them feel better about themselves. And I think it should be the other way around. That's just my 2 cents. And to end, I'll say this. I think if you have your act together, that's going to provide such a beacon of light to others. You know, you're going to lead by example. You know, there's too many people out there just talking the talk and not walking the walk. So, you know, before you even worry about society, I would say my 2 cents would be focus on yourself. Be a little bit more selfish and get your own house in order before you criticize the world. But yeah, that's today's solo episode. It's a longer one than I usually do, but I guess it's been a while, so I had a lot of stuff pent up. And these solo episodes are going to pop up here and there. You know, I'll do a series of interviews and I'll put a solo one out. I'll do a series of interviews and I'll put one out. And again, you know, if you're interested, check out my merch. You know, it's available. It's free shipping in the U.S. All items, the sales tax is baked into the price. I have a coffee mug for $25. I have 2 hats for $35. I have a hoodie for $60. I have a t-shirt for $30. And I have another shirt, RP, for short t-shirt. And it's $40. And that price that I just mentioned is the full price you will pay because I factored in tax and shipping into the price. I built that into the price. And again, free shipping on all orders in the United States. If you do order outside of the United States, you will have to pay an additional tax, an additional price for shipping. But yeah, that wraps up today's solo episode. Again, I'm very thankful for anyone who listens to me. I know you're busy out there. I know everyone's busy. So I respect you and I respect your time. So I hope these episodes provide value for you. And if you're feeling nice, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You know, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and follow me on social media. My handle is @SeeThroughPod. And that's all the plugs I'm going to do to end this episode up. But until next time, you know, stay transparent. And then I'm going to introduce this new phrase, you know, have tunnel vision. You know, see through the bullshit, see where you need to go and get there. You know, we already have tunnel vision due to RP. We might as well take it up a notch and have tunnel vision in our real lives. So I'm going to end on that. Take care, everyone. Peace.